Honorable Mr. Chairman, charming and very well-dressed bellboy, respected members of the jury, my forcibly enduring members of the government, submissive members of the opposition, a beautiful audience, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. Eureka! I found it! Is what one great man once said. And what had he found? Force is what he'd found. Force is keeping us afloat, keeping us on the ground.
Here, here.
Here. Force is what is keeping you on your chairs tonight, ladies and gentlemen.
Here, here.
Force is strength. Force is power. Force is change. Force is revolution.
Here, here.
Force is the French citizens rising up against the unjust monarchs to give power back to the people, to give birth to democracy.
Here, here.
Force is standing up and rising against oppression. Force is 1 million Indian people united under one man in their non-violent, non-cooperation against the British. No, thank you.
Which one?
Both of you. Force is moral. Force is being a black woman, refusing to give her seat to a white man.
Yeah.
Force is a schoolgirl daring to raise her voice against the Taliban and surviving an assassination attempt.
On a point of information, Madam
Force is
Speaker,
Malala. Please,
should you shoot people in the face to have your democracy?
I thank you for the question. But you see, ladies and gentlemen, tonight we will explain to you how violence is one of the forces, of course, but not all forces are violent.
You're here.
Force is strength of character. Force comes from within. And it is that efficient, positive, constructive force that propels us to peace. Peace, which is merely a balance of the forces. A balance of power. And for achieving that equilibrium, what do we need? We need laws, and we need law enforcement.
On a point of information, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. No, thank you. What is peacekeeping without force? What is the police without the force? What is nature without its forces?
Point of
What is
information,
information? Thank you. All of these lose their credibility without the might of force behind them. Yes,
Do
madam.
you think that the police of Russia is peaceful?
Well, let's take one country, for example, and generalize it. Why not, Madam Speaker? But we're talking about the police forces all over the world who have ensured that laws are followed and murderers kept at bay. Look at this motion closely, ladies and gentlemen. It reads that this House would use force to make peace, not as the only tool, but was one of the instruments in our strategic toolbox. And this lesson of force brokering peace is one Europe has learned from the past. Europe, the phoenix of peace, arose from the ashes of war and suffering, and we all know of that one forceful intervention which ended that dark period of history. No, thank you, madam. And the wolves that attacked us then have been kept at bay because we are not afraid. Because we are united. We are a collective force. We are ready to fight for our right to live in peace. When the fires of hatred ravage the planet, we will not fight fire with fire. We will fight fire with water. Water, a positive, constructive entity which carves canyons and moves mountains. We will be the water uniting men and women to rise against the mountains of oppression.
Point of information, Madam Speaker.
No, thank you. We will not suppressed. We will not be suppressed. We will not be suppressed. Please go ahead.
So you will fight force against force, but still that will be using water against fire. I don't get your point exactly. Could you clarify?
As Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci, my fine friend, once said, water is the driving force of all nature. When faced with the wolves, we will not be meek and weak like this sheepish opposition. Who wants to appease the wolves the same way they did in 1938 when they bought peace for our time? And as my vivacious colleague Pierre Magnon will show us that force gives peace a purpose, followed by my esteemed colleague Benoit, who will explain how peace can be achieved by intervention if necessary. In turn, my charming colleague Zach will show us how the use of a thread of force is a force unto itself and can be used to make peace. And finally, my delightful colleague Zoe will give you a piece of her mind by proving that force is complementary to peace. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not remember today as the day the earth stood still. Let us move forward. Let us use force to move forward. Let us use force to make peace. Accept the motion.
Thank you very much to our Prime Minister. Now, to answer that, ladies and gentlemen, I will call upon the leader of the opposition, first speaker from ENS, Ms. Anne Fauvet.
Handsome chairman, with a poster so majestic, no one would dare use force against you. Beloved bellboy, I wouldn't mind some peace with you. Fine members of the jury. You're here! Fine members of the jury, we won't use weapons to bring you peace, only our words. Dear members of the government, fellow members of the opposition, dear audience, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Well, on the surface, what the government just said might sound reasonable, yes. But, ladies and gentlemen, don't let them fool you. Because like Nabila's brain, the government's argumentation is an illusion. I was a bit confused about the definition of force, because we've talked about, physical force, but also about words, or about people sitting quietly on the bus. I mean, force isn't just any action, it's a concrete, it's a physical action. I'm going to give you an example of force turning out wrong. We've heard about revolution. Well, yes, force was used in the French Revolution. We ended up with Robespierre. You said that the police in Russia wasn't representative, but what about that in China or Iran? This isn't peaceful. The link between force and peace is non-existent.
Point of information, madam.
Later, please. The truth is, you should not, and you cannot use force to achieve peace.
Point of information, please.
Yes?
Can you explain to me why we have armies?
We have armies to survive. But, someone I shoot in the face isn't someone who's going to make peace with me. Take a look at 2 Koreas. Force was used in a war against a ruthless dictator. The country was literally bombed to a mere ceasefire. The country is still officially at war and hostile. On one side, the land of Nyan Cat and Hello Kitty. And on the other side, Kim Jong-un, the crazy American youth who looks like an overweight babyface.
On that point of information, madam?
Later, please. His official motto? Nuke them, Pyongyang style. Later, please, madam. Peace is not just the absence of war or of open violence. It is something positive. It is something you build. Peace is not the silence of graveyards.
Here.
Force, on the other hand, relies on strength, pain, and violence. It is not any coercion, but a very specific kind. It's backed by the use or threat of violence. In a conflict, force may create a winner, yes, but we do not live in a Queen's song. We are not always the champions, my friends. Because if you have the size of a hobbit and the feet of a hobbit, like me, force is just out of the question. Because what about the guys just using force against?
On that point of information, man,
Yes.
along with hobbits and Nyan Cat's world, your world seems to be really ideal and of the mind. How would you intend to come back to the real world?
Well, you know, the real world. In the real world, the guys you're using force against, well, what you call peace, they call oppression. Don't the seeds of fear, anger, and hatred. Because we are not living in a world of ours. Yes, that is true. We're killing the wicked witch of the West solves everything. And just because you have force doesn't mean you should use it. I mean, parents can slap their children, but it is just inefficient. Why don't you just take away their dessert? I mean, say, look, a Pokemon, then take it. Force pulls people away from each other. And peace. Bring them together. No, thank you. Force is conflict, and peace is harmony. This is why force never brings peace. No, thank you. Because peace is not about winning. The distinction between peace and winning will be clearly shown by our beloved Louis, who, like the delightful Smurfette, will demonstrate that force can only at best, no, thank you, bring about a victory. And peace isn't about winning. But don't worry about finding peace, because our very own Alia has you covered. Like Hermione, always relying on her brain, she will reveal before you that you should always try to find other ways than force to actually make peace.
Yeah.
Then, our dear Victor, who, like the observant Professor Xavier, with a blonde wig, has understood human nature. Well, he will highlight how force is a vicious circle. Force only creates conflict. Finally, our magnificent Mahatma Rami will enlighten you once and for all by showing that emotion should be rejected. And this is true for any kind of situations and scales, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, for instance, think about conflicts in a couple. Don't use force. Have intercourse. Peace is not when your enemy lies prostrated on the floor. It is when you are both able to shake hands. Force pulls people away from each other, and peace brings them together. Force is conflict, and peace is harmony. Well, you don't find peace, ladies and gentlemen. You build it. Tonight, it is peace itself that is at stake. And this is why we urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to take a stand and reject the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the leader of the opposition. And now I call upon the second speaker from the government side, Mr. Pierre Magnon.
Honourable Chairman, distinguished members of the jury, stupendous bellboy, dear members of the opposition, fellow members of the government, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk basic physics, shall we? I know you don't want to hear it, but in the end, what would happen to a number of atoms that would not have any force to bind them together? Surely that would drive them apart, wouldn't it? They'd end up being individual particles with no other surrounding them, drifting in the vacuum of space and time, with no force to bend their trajectories. That's emptiness, death, a desert. Ubi solitudinem faciunt, pacem appellant. Where they in the desert, they called it peace. Is that what you want to do?
Shame.
The opposition. The desert of our civilization, and call it peace. Because the same goes for life at our scale. If people are not kept together in peaceful coexistence through the use of force, they're only driven apart.
On the point of instruments, Mr.
Hold
Speaker.
your peace, sir, thank you. They're only allowed to let their basic instincts run free. Without the use of force, some of them might steal, loot, kill, hell, even listen to Justin Bieber. And one person I suspect of listening to Justin Bieber a little too much, along with her Nyan Cat, Pokemon, and Gangnam Style, is Miss Bové, who would have us believe that force and violence are on the same footing. Let me correct that. Violence is random, erratic, unlimited, irrational.
Sir?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
So, violent army is random, erratic, without an attack.
Violence on the part of an army is usually the act of a wrong leadership.
Point of instruments, Mr. Speaker.
Force is measured, is directed at something, is carefully employed.
Point of information.
No, thank you. The state of violence is like a bottle of gas with particles randomly bumping into each other. A system ready to explode. A state of force is a river flowing in one determined direction. In one direction, as we all know, is much better than Justin Bieber, isn't it?
On the point of information, Mr. Speaker.
No, thank you. Like my colleague Manali said, or didn't, by the way, I don't know.
Shame!
Violence is chaos. Force is purpose.
Point of information.
Go ahead.
Isn't something that is organized and has a purpose more dangerous?
Dangerous compared to what? I don't get the question. Can you please repeat?
Well, if something is carefully organized to work, isn't that something more dangerous than, something that has no plans?
I think you're being too afraid of danger. Be at peace with it. What do you think makes the difference between great revolutionaries, like your Gandhi, by the way, who's on our side on this one?
Point of information, Mr. Speaker.
No, thank you, sir. Gandhi, but I'm sure I'm going to answer your point of information by saying that Gandhi stated non-violence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. What separates visionaries from terrorists? Why are there Mandelas and Bin Ladens? It's not that some use force and not the others. It's purpose. It's willingness to change the game. It's the ability to join forces and march together. Dear members of the opposition, don't believe for 1 second that Aung San Suu Kyi was weak because she kept walking in front of those guns pointed at her. She may be a non-violent figure, but what a sense of purpose.
Point of information, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
So your purpose should be to use force instead of your purpose being to do whatever you take with diplomacy to have peace?
Try to come with a...
Okay, shorter version. Your purpose is force, our purpose is peace. Is our purpose better?
Your purpose is your purpose, mine is mine. I'm saying we can... I'm saying we can achieve peace using force. That's all. One thing is sure. If we don't use force, we're going to have chaos. That's what it is.
Shame.
No, thank you. The opposition seems to believe that force only creates resentment from the person's side which it is directed. They think it can't be used to achieve peace. Is that right?
Shame.
Right. Then I'm right.
Shame too.
We would use force to make peace. That's all. You view peace as a state, an ideal state, where notions such as jealousy and anger have disappeared. That's called paradise. We believe peace isn't merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. And that's not from me, by the way, that's from the movie Air Force One. But pretending to have justice without force is pointless. Laws do have to come into force to mean something. Ladies and gentlemen, society forces us to live in peace. Through the use of force, it makes us renounce many of the liberties we thought we were born with. And that's why I understand the opposition's anger against the forces of the state. But don't become allergic to that state that keeps you alive. Don't mask your fear of the other by pretending to be pacifists. Don't reject the omnipresence of force in our peaceful state. This house would use force to make peace, and so should you. Peace out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I call upon the second speaker from the opposition, Mr. Louis Nago.
Dear Mr. Chairman, lovely timekeeper, members of the jury, may you smoothly reject a motion. Respected members of the government, nice to meet you. Fellow members of the opposition, we will not use force, but we will be strong.
Hear, hear.
Lovely members of the audience, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. The purpose of my speech, ladies and gentlemen, will be to show you that force can at best bring victory, but that peacemaking involves a completely different process than winning. I would like to show you that choosing force is betting on the wrong horse. At least if it's peace you want to achieve at the end. Thank you, Anne, for leaving me with the role of the Smurfette. I think it will fit my speech perfectly. Now, concerning the government and Mr. Pierre Magnan, I don't really see the link between force in physics, Archimedes, rivers, and making peace. Force is a little bit of everything, and we had a very strong confusion with Gandhi. I mean, he wouldn't be very happy to learn that non-violence was force. I think you're mixing strength, which is actually a capacity, and force, which is using it in a violent way. Malcolm X used force. Gandhi used fasting.
On that point, sir,
Yes, please.
wouldn't you say that Gandhi, who happens to be from my country, FYI, used the collective force of the people to unite them against the British? Would you not say he used the force of the people?
I would say use the strength of the people. If Gandhi had taken a rifle and shot the Prime Minister, I would say he had used force, but he sat on the floor and just made pressure with the people.
On that point, sir.
Now, peace is not... Oh, I'm sorry, no lecture, please. So peace is not winning. Strange as it may seem, if you really want to make peace, it can involve renouncing to winning sometimes. Let's take the example of a couple. Incessant conflict, fighting, yelling, throwing plates. And at the end, if you want to reach peace, you'd better compromise than use force. At some point, someone has to stop the conflict, and not by using force and aiming better with the plate. Just by talking, compromising, admitting they're wrong.
Point of information, sir.
Again, yes please, pleasure.
Would you have spoken peace to a man who was once set out to destroy the whole of Europe by creating a Holocaust?
Talking of Hitler? Well, you know, I'm not seeking to make peace with Hitler, I'm seeking to make peace with German people. And to come back to the couple, I think it's a more cheerful example. You can't keep fighting until the end, you've got to start talking. I then advise you not to listen to the government because force brings divorce. If you want peace, don't use force to stop the conflict. Peace is more than just not to be at war. Peace is what you build afterwards. building peace involves dialogue, understanding and exchange, and this understanding is Gandhi's most precious value. It is very different from winning with force. On this point, history shows well enough that the less force is used, the easier peace is reached. If you butcher everyone around, it will be hard for your opponent to make real peace with you once the conflict is over.
On that point, sir,
Yes, please?
what would the people of Rwanda, by whom we didn't intervene when they were being massacred, think of that? What would you tell them? Should they have played cards and drawn pictures together, or should they, I don't know, have...
Could you make it conservative?
Yes, what do you
So
think?
should they fight? Should they fight, you mean? Should they fight to reach peace?
Should we have intervened in 1993 in Rwanda?
In that case, you can pull the tribes apart, but to make peace between them, you need to have them talk. Because when you take decisive force, there will be war again. Let's go on. So, as we will show you later, force only creates more conflict. Force just allows the conflict to go on. It's not by pouring oil that you will stop the fire, because for me, violence is not water, it's oil. Now, the difference... No, please, thank you. Now, why has capitulation or winning, depending on the side, has nothing to do with peace? Well, Julius Caesar, for example, called what he imposed in Gaul the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Now, what kind of peace was that? Caesar killed half the population, reduced the other half in slavery, and so that no Vercingetorix would ever rise again. And the only thing left in Gaul is sticky cheese.
Here, here!
He did win, using massive military force, but that was not peace. Using force prevents peace more than it enables it. When people start building, talking, exchanging again, they are building peace. But the use of force entails exactly the opposite.
Here, here!
I'll now draw to my conclusion, ladies and gentlemen. Peace is not just winning, and certainly not winning with force. This motion hurts your common sense. You don't make water out of fire, and force will never, never achieve peace. It will just be a temporary ceasefire by putting the two opponents away from each other. Now, our following speaker, the bright Alia, will explain you why we should always try to find other ways than force. And good news, such ways exist. Because the conflict is peace. Force is a conflict and peace is harmony. This is why I beg you, ladies and gentlemen, to please peacefully reject the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I now call upon the third speaker from the government side, Mr. Benoit Doncoin.
Honorable Chairman, esteemed members of the jury, very flowery boy, dear peace-loving members of the opposition, fellow members of the government, ladies and gentlemen, you need a third party from outside to attain a peaceful situation. And this someone from the outside is not winning or losing, Mr. Nugget.
Here.
You were right. It is not about two people winning or losing. It is about making peace. You should have spoken a little bit more about that. Because it is about the role you, third party, you play. And you see, this positive, peace-enforcing exterior reference is necessary. Because if you cannot remember what peace is like, if you were born in a world of everlasting violence, how can you reasonably think that you will resolve the conflict on your own? When all you've done for the past 3 years is fighting in a suburb of Damascus to fight oppression, Mr. Ben, how can you reasonably think that you will stop and make equitable, stable, non-abusive peace? No, thank you. Taking into consideration the problems of your executioner, that will not happen.
Mr. Speaker?
No, thank you. You may think it is better to wait until eventually the two parties find a good, durable agreement by themselves to just tell people that, in fact, all you need is love. Well,
Point of information, please.
please.
So love is all you need to make peace, not force, right?
Love is not exactly all you need. That's what I'm saying. If you listen carefully, I said that all you need is love is something that you may say, but it is not sufficient. You need force in every case, you see?
1 minute, Mr. Speaker.
No, thank you. If you want to tell people that all you need is love, then just tell that to the people of Rwanda. Tell that to the people of Cambodia. Just tell them that you do not want to be this third party. Tell them how much longer exactly do you want to wait. Thank you. You know, I am not criticizing this. It is a perfectly natural reaction to be afraid to intervene. But remember this, ladies and gentlemen. Sed it quid timuit, ne non succederet. He who feared he would not succeed sat still. And that's what I am asking you, ladies and gentlemen. Stop fearing. Stop fearing that you might do the wrong thing by helping your neighbors. Stop hoping that things will get better. Decide yourself to make things better. Just be that exterior force
Mr. Speaker.
and allow people to taste peace. Yes, please.
What gives you the right to say, I have the right to intervene?
I'm not saying that you have the right to intervene. I'm saying that you have the responsibility to intervene. Be that exterior force. Allow people to taste peace by ending conflicts in the first place. And this is the way with which you will be able to build a real peace. And as my dear colleague, Mr. Pierre, explained, force is not always about using a machine gun. And most of the time, in fact, force is being this neutral, moral reference, enabling change, enabling movement, and allowing peace to happen. In every case, when you want peace, you need someone from the outside. And everybody here experienced it. I experienced it as well. You see, when I used to be a little boy, I kept fighting with my little brother about whether the Beatles were a good band or not. You remember that time, the time when you did not have Gangnam Style? And it was only with the intercession of my mother that we would eventually stop fighting, because she forced us to start peace talks. And you may say that this peace enforced from the outside is not a good peace. That it is a simple status quo between two parties that still hate each other.
Mr. Speaker.
No, thank you. And I have to agree on that. It is not itself a very good peace. That if what you want is a durable, stable, long-lasting peace, then you must go through this status quo. You see, this fragile peace coming from the outside is the first step towards mutual understanding coming from the inside. And I will not let anyone say that a good quarrel is better than this bad, fragile peace. Ladies and gentlemen, enforce this fragile peace, and then just let it be.
So you think you can force
I
peace on
accept your
people?
point of information, yes. I was just wondering before I end, do you remember the 100-Year War between France and England? Of course you don't, because after more than 5 centuries, do we still want to kill, to destroy, to annihilate what are now our allies, our friends, and I may dare to say our brothers and sisters? Because you see, the longer you have peace, the longer peace is going to last. Just give peace a chance.
You're here!
If two people cannot make peace on their own, then do not be afraid to give them a hand. You will see that this fragile peace, enforced from the outside, will lay the foundation of a durable peace and true mutual understanding between people. You may say that I am a dreamer. But I'm not the only one. And if you look towards our past, you will, ladies and gentlemen, you will see that these peace-loving dreams do eventually become reality. as long as you want them to become reality. And the first step for that, ladies and gentlemen, is to be this peace-enforcing third party, to join us and support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. May I now call upon the third speaker from the opposition, Ms. Anya Abara.
Honorable Chairman, no force could match the wise actions.
Here.
Lovely bad boy, being at peace would be to drown in your gaze. Members of the jury, may your judgments enlighten our minds. Respected members of the government, dear fellow members of the opposition, lovely audience, friends, passersby, secret agents, spies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I must grant the opposition one thing tonight. They are on fire.
The government.
Sure, the government. Sorry, not the opposition. Our fire. So, first I told myself that I was just gonna stand there and watch them burn, but it's alright because I love the way they lie. I felt so appalled, I had to answer. So for you, force is people being united, force is having a purpose, force is doing something. Yeah, right, if force was everything, we would all agree with the motion. So, I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with this point. Force, as Anne said, is something that might resort to violence, at least in the idea of it. And then, we were not talking about not making peace and not intervening. We are talking about intervening in a wise way. It was It was the third party in World War II. I think we ended up with the Cold War afterwards. So, the smart Louis showed you that force can only at best bring victory. And victory is not peace. In fact, force never, ever makes peace. And as our pragmatic Victor will show you, force will only create more conflict.
With information.
Later, please. There are other ways than force, later, please, which are way more efficient. Take Gandhi, for instance, indeed. You know, Gandhi was once asked by a journalist in front of the whole parliament what he thought about British civilization. And he answered, I think it would be a very good idea. This is the man. This is the man who did not use force, but still brilliantly succeeded, where any use of force would have been a disaster.
On that point, madam.
Later, please. Gandhi used economic sanctions. They stopped buying salt. And basically, Gandhi is the equivalent of Winnie the Pooh, because he walks around half naked, and when he's mad at someone, he does not fight, he simply stops sharing his honey. And it's not the only case in which peace, where peace was made without force. Take the Velvet Revolution, for instance. It overthrew the communist regime without any use of violence. The facts show that demonstration, communication, negotiations are the best options for making peace. Ladies and gentlemen, my team is telling you to be sincere and begging you to reconsider your false idea of peace and help. Because force is conflict and peace is harmony. Unfortunately, we hear too much people saying that they went through all the options and the only thing left would be using force. Let me give you an example, which is Syria, that one of the speakers mentioned, which is FYI, my country too. In Syria, the United Nations have been as useful as the RERB when there's a strike. So, what do we have? We have governments pretending they did everything that was in their power to achieve peace. What did they do actually? They just kindly asked a bloody dictator, would you please stop killing people? No? Okay, have fun. And let me tell you, inventors of hummus deserve better than this. It took 2 years, more than 2 years actually, to get mass destruction weapons out of Syria. Humanitarian help has been almost non-existent. And no one tried to apply sanctions on Russia. I mean, the only thing Russia should be able to send to Syria is vodka and matryoshkas. And certainly not weapons. It is too easy to say we did everything when we actually watched and did nothing, and it's also shameful. And force should not be taken as a principle. You will see there are tons of opportunities to make peace that we ignore because we are focused on force. Force does not make peace. Sure, if my neighbor is listening to Justin Bieber all day long and refusing to use headphones, I have to barge in and turn off his computer. But this is using force for survival. And we will never make peace if I don't go and see him with 2 cups of tea and no problem in his cup. Any use of force is a disaster for creating a real and lasting peace.
Shame!
And it's a shame that this government is trying to brainwash you some more and convince you that force is a valid option. It is not. We should try to find other ways than force, because this way, first, they exist, and then they're much more efficient than violence. Like Winnie the Pooh, we should share the honey. Because force brings conflict, and peace is harmony. So I thank you for the attention, and let's hope the jury reflects the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Moving on now to the 4th speaker from the government side, Mr. Jacques de Chalandard.
Honorable Chairman, esteemed bellboy, dear jury, fellow members of the government, members of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen. We've talked a lot about force tonight. Let's talk about peace. If we could get everyone in this room to just close their eyes and visualize world peace for just an hour. Imagine how serene and quiet it would be until the looting started. I'm afraid your words have no force, Miss Abba. How do you give power to words? Where does credibility stem from? Not only would this government use force to make peace, we would use the threat of force to secure peace. Words imbued with force can be just as effective as physical force itself. Granted, the effect of a speech is psychological, moral, and mental. A different kind of force, but a force nonetheless. I will go further than that. Miss Abba, you talked of negotiations. How do you negotiate if you have no bargaining chip?
You're here.
What? No, thank you. Miss Fauvet, you would have force, but not use it. Let me illustrate. This honorable chairman was once a child, believe it or not. And when this adorable toddler did not want to eat his vegetables, his mother would probably say something along the lines of, "Listen, pumpkin," or was it honey bunny? "If you don't eat your broccoli, I will count to 3. 1.
Point of information, Mr. Speaker?
2. Yes, sir.
Isn't the point of Isn't the point of counting to 3 never actually reaching 3 just like you did?
I completely agree with you, sir. Because he thinks she would use force. Ultimately, she doesn't even have to. The threat of force was enough. But what if the same cuddly infant were to look deep down into his mother's apparently malevolent eyes, search her soul, and see the inescapable truth that she can never harm a human being, let alone such a handsome specimen. Very young son and chairman-to-be. What if he were to realize that nothing happens after 3? Would he cave in? What if Little Red Riding Hood discovers the big bad wolf has no teeth? This is a grim truth the Grimms tell us. An empty threat is useless. What if the guy in front of you at a poker table discovers you have no ace in the hole? What if Basha realizes that Barak will never cross that red line? I ask you, what happens then? Diplomacy is no poker game, Mr. Barak. You cannot afford to bluff when lives are at stake. You must be prepared to back your threat. The moment this honorable gentleman understands his mother would never use force, her words lose all credibility. And the instant her ultimatum hollows out, it loses its weight, its potency, its force. Ladies first, please.
So you should hit your kid so that actually threatening him would be efficient?
This is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, who here has never had a spanking by their parents? Then that means if the case, your parents were prepared to use force, that doesn't mean they use it. But you have. We don't say we must use force. No, thank you. We say we would use force. And that is why our threat is credible. In 1938, Neville Chamberlain was definitely not prepared to use force. He turned a blind eye to the hate that Hitler was brewing. Churchill would probably have been a member of this government, alongside de Gaulle, Roosevelt, and Champignon. He said he had nothing to offer. No, thank you, sir. But blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Churchill displayed honesty, courage, and insight. No, thank you, sir. When necessary, we must use force to secure the long-lasting peace my colleague Benoit talked about. Now, force is just an instrument. It is a spoon, a toothbrush, a comb. It is a key to open the door of peace. It is a pitchfork, a shovel, a hoe. So is life. It is also a needle, a hammer, and an axe. Would you give a child an axe to play with? Would you entrust the care of a gun to a 20-year-old engineering student? Would you even pay him for it? Who then should enforce the law? Wonder Woman? Superman? Chairman and Robin? Who shall guard the guardians? We don't live in a world of vigilantes, or superheroes for that matter. In the real world, the state must use force. The state must be our pacemaker, using positive force to give us the rhythm of peace.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's now a great pleasure to call upon the fourth speaker from the opposition, Mr. Victor Peno.
Dear Chairman, my favorite Irishman on this side of the channel. Lovely timekeeper. I'm very sad that I missed Valentine's Day with you. Only for the shirt! Members of the jury, tonight's adjudicators, members of the government, impressive speakers. with not so impressive arguments. Members of the opposition, advocates of non-violence, diplomacy. Members of the audience, supporters of both teams, who apparently are using acoustic force to win this debate tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Well, we were expecting a big challenge tonight, and I must say, the École Polytechnique has not demerited. It would be dangerous for me to try and rebut what this speaker just said. Now, wouldn't it? But on second thought, I think I will. Your point, Mr. Speaker, is on deterrence. You said a very true thing. The point of deterrence is that you're never going to use it, provided if you never use force, it becomes an anti-threat. Why do nobody fears our nukes today? Because people know we're never going to use them. And the problem with deterrence is that you're bound to use force someday to make your credibility. Why aren't we credible in Syria? Well, because nobody wants to intervene in Syria. If we use force, it wouldn't be deterrence, it would be violence, conflict, death and hatred. And you were talking about the physical force, ladies and gentlemen, that sums up my point pretty well. The third Newton's law says, action creates reaction, and just like action creates reaction, force only creates more force. It was to be expected. If you use the word force in a motion,
On that point, sir?
no thank you, then quote Star Wars you must. And to paraphrase Yoda, to make peace, force with us we should not. Louis showed that peace is more than winning. Alia has asked us to always try to find other ways than peace.
On point of information, sir?
Yes, please.
Wouldn't you say that Yoda would also say the Force doesn't take sides?
It's true the force doesn't take side, but that's in a world where you know that the bad guys wear black, have terrible asthma and terrible eczema. In the real world, you can't always tell who the bad guys are because they treat their asthma. Force pulls people away from each other and peace brings them together. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Professor Xavier, with a wig, that explains it. It so happens there's somebody who's experienced this more than anyone. He who must not be named. Not François Hollande, gynecologist. No, the only man in the world to be able to breathe without a nose, Lord Voldemort. Lord Voldemort, albeit the fictionary character, tried to kill Harry Potter, who, let's face it, is not very scary. He used force, deadly force. Avada Kedavra. Which gives the surprising result, Lord Voldemort killed himself whilst trying to kill Harry. Twice. If only when Harry met Voldy, they could just go for a beer and talk it out. But the problem is, it is shameful that they couldn't do this. Because in an imaginary world where you know who are the bad guys and the good guys, you can't go for a beer with Lord Voldemort.
Point of information, sir.
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Fictional characters are not the only ones who have a problem with force. America, which is also my country, has it too. Let's talk about Afghanistan. On September 9/11, a rogue terrorist group attacked and killed thousands of New Yorkers. America's response was to attack Afghanistan to hand down bin Laden. The only problem with that logic is that A, Afghanistan is full of mountains, and B, when you bomb a mountain, the mountain does not collapse. Nonetheless, the US generals spent trillions of dollars, military and innocent lives, in a pointless war with no purpose, no funding, and no reason. And this war has been a disaster not only in Afghanistan. The Patriot Act has made every citizen in America a suspect. Massive military spending brought new weapons. And social issues in America disappeared under a rock. And now spreading World War paranoia, the NSA is now spying on every citizen of the world, making Angela Merkel's phone call, Hollande's lovers, and my internet browsing history a military secret. Oh my! Do you want to look at my browsing history? Go ahead.
Don't you think that the problem with the Afghan war is not the mountains, but the fact that the United States used force only to kill the Taliban rather than trying to make peace between the different ethnic groups of this country?
The problem, Mr. Speaker, is that America responded to force by force. The problem, Mr. Speaker, is that America attacked a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. The problem, Mr. Speaker, is that force only creates more force. The American decision makers at the time should have refrained from doing what they do too much. just bombing people because they think they look dangerous. Force only creates force, ladies and gentlemen. 12 terrorists managed to draw the world's largest army into a country that had never attacked them. Just like in Vietnam, by the way, and also catastrophic failure, force only creates more conflict. Peace is not like Viagra. It does not kick in instantaneously. After World War II, France and Germany decided we should stop fighting. It took 10 years to sign the Rome Treaty, 25 to sign the Brussels Treaty, and 60 to have a constitution in Europe. But now we have the European Union, and France and Germany will never fight again, just like France and Great Britain will never, unless Hollande has an affair with Angela. Fighting for peace is like having sex to keep your virginity. And saying that war is good for peace is like saying your favorite sex position is abstinence. Ladies and gentlemen, what we want is peace, not ceasefire, and sometimes not even victory. Members of the jury, let no one tell you that force is the way to peace. Force may be, if it does not fail miserably, a way to an unstable ceasefire, which will then lead to another war, another resistance, another conflict. Peace is not the silence of graveyards. My time is up, which leaves the floor to Mahatma Remy to finish up. But a final thought, ladies and gentlemen. Remember what Mother Teresa said. Peace begins with a smile.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Before I call upon the next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, the next two speakers, can I remind the members of the audience that after these two official speeches, you will have your opportunity to make speeches on, for, against the motion or ask questions to either of the two teams. So you can be thinking about that in advance, but nonetheless I hope you will listen to the last two official speakers. The first of whom is the whip from the government side, Ms. Zoe Duran.
Honorable Chairman, esteemed members of the jury, beautiful and charming Robin Bellboy, resolute and strong government, honorable members of the opposition, wonderful audience.
Order, please.
Imagine Harry Potter, since you love him so much, without a wand, facing he who must not be named. Hey, Voldemort! Hey, Voldy! You killed Fred Weasley. You killed Mom and Dad. You've been ruining my romantic plans with Ginny. But I'm cool. I'm peace. Let's just talk this out. Let's make peace. Chill. What Voldemort needed was a good alia abara cadabra square in between the eyes. In fact, I'll be geekier than you guys were. In fact, Harry Potter used Expelliarmus charm against Voldemort, which redirected Voldemort's force against himself and ended the war that was plaguing wizards and muggles hereafter happy. Therefore, force ended the war in Harry Potter. This isn't a hippie, vegan, Teletubby world full of kitties.
On a point of information, madam?
No, thank you. This is a badass, rock-solid, meat-eating, painful world that will smack you hard in the face. True, sometimes bratty kids need a good spanking. You talked of North Korea, you talked of China and Russia, where force was used to the wrong means. What you don't seem to understand is that we advocate the use of force alongside justice, efficiency, morality.
On a point of information, Madam Speaker.
Please go ahead.
How can you be sure that you have the right means?
Here, here.
Think checks and balances that will keep the wolves at bay. We choose to keep and maintain that subtle equilibrium between good and evil, between order and chaos, between violence and law enforcement by using that wonderful power that is force. Mr. Nugget, you talked about long-lasting peace, opposing strength and force. Peace brought by force may not be perfect, but it is the first step to making the world a better place. What would you have told the people of Rwanda? How can you sleep at night?
Here.
Should they have solved their problems on their own until they died, became corpses riddled with nuggets?
So the French intervention in Mali brought peace.
Here.
That is not always to discuss. Force is not always perfect. But should we have stepped back and done nothing? I ask you that, sir. The world you're talking about of communication and negotiation is great, but that only really works for four
On a point of
people.
information, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Tinky Winky, Dipsy, Lala, and Poe. Sure, like my colleague Jacques said, not everyone can wield a gun. We advocate caution, even restraint, an iron fist in a velvet glove. Like my colleagues Manali and Pierre said, we will use force like water. The force of water against rocks, digging canyons far greater than any human creation. Like the waves that polish the rocks on the beach until the hard edges become round and soft, and you, dear, you can walk barefoot on them. Gentlemen, we are those waves that will polish the edges, connect the dots. You said that force creates more force. 1 second. Mr. Pinot. But a judge enforcing the laws doesn't create more force. It brings peace. A wave can hit you in the face when you're not looking, you'll tell me. But you can surf on the wave. That force will sweep you away and bring you back to the beach. It will bring you back to safety. In 1992, Serbia needed that kind of force to stop the massacre and bring peace and safety to its population. But water can also be a tsunami.
Information, please.
No, thank you. It can be a force of destruction. It can be the force of the bomb on Hiroshima. And even that did end the war.
On a point of information, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Pinot, if no one fears our nukes, should we throw them to the trash? May I remind you also that France and Germany might be at peace now, but they came to peace, I remind you, through force. You need guns to maintain order. You need roses to make the world prettier. But you need both to make rock and roll. Peace doesn't just happen. The rock will roll down the slope and it will hit you hard on the head unless someone has the force and the courage to stop it. A third party is necessary to intervene in conflicts where peace and stability are nothing but children's tales and hefty dreams. George Orwell once said, "People sleep peacefully in their beds at night only because rough men stand ready to do violence on their behalf." Already that which you need, as Yoda said, strength and courage must prevail. Adopt the motion!
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's now with great pleasure I call upon the whip from the opposition side, Mr. Hamid.
Honorable Chairman, our very own non-forceful arbiter, lovely bellboy, you're on fire tonight. Crafty members of the government, I can see you trying to skillfully force your opinions on the public. Fellow members of the opposition, you have been beautifully successful in convincing the audience the truth?
Shame!
The truth is hard sometimes. Members of the audience, dear supporters from both sides who came to see this shameful proposition be rejected. Believe me. It is a shameful proposition, yes. After a lively night full of stories, arguments, dubious examples, and very odd comparisons, let's take a story from the real world this time, not Harry Potter, not the Beatles, just the real world, of a young man who dreamt of freedom for his people. He thought the best way to do it was to use force, so that the people in charge would get scared and meet his demands. But that didn't solve his problems. It made them bigger. The force he used enforced the propaganda they spread about him. It led to him being imprisoned for 27 years. At least as long as my abstinence period. Now, it's only when he gave up violence and resorted to peaceful means. It's only when he saw that force does not bring peace. It's only when he saw that force can only bring death and despair. Not now, sir. It's only when he saw that force can only bring despair that he resorted to peace, and only then was the oppression lifted and the people freed. That man's name was Nelson Mandela. Go ahead.
What kind of force, moral force, do you think it takes to survive 28 years in Robben Island?
It takes moral strength to survive 27 years on an island. And on that point, I go back to what Manali has said.
Point of information, sir.
Sorry, not now. Manali has said that force is only one tool in a bag full of tools that you use. But at the same time, Pierre said that force is a hammer, it is a nail, it is all left in the bag afterwards. You said, that we would use justice, efficiency, and morality afterwards. Well, sorry, Zoe, but you also said that force is morality, force is justice, force is efficiency. So what did you leave us to? This motion said this house would use force to make peace. Well, instead of what? If force is everything, then we could have just said this house would make peace, and no debate would be around. This house would use force to make peace. That means this house would reject violence. This house would enforce peace with its own means, not using peaceful methods, as you said. Now, a question was raised on why do we have armies. The last time I heard we don't have armies to have peace. We have armies to either conquer people or beat the conquerors. Now, they talked about European intervention in Africa. Well, the last time I checked, that didn't go very well. What went well, though, is the whole world supporting... Go ahead.
Are you saying that we should just not have armies anymore?
Well, ideally, in a world where nobody tried to conquer us, yes, but that world isn't peaceful. Sorry, our world isn't peaceful. Now, Zoe talked about that the world of Harry Potter, you needed a force to end the war. Yes, it is true. In fictional wars, in fictional worlds, force is used. But you know what? The common property to all fictional worlds, they're always at war. There's always a plane falling down. There's always a building having to crumble. There's always a madman trying to use the force to entrap the galaxy. There's always somebody trying to do something. The property of every fictional world is that they are always at war and never at peace and are fictional. Go ahead.
To come back to the real world, would you say that this good old violence that you would put it in Serbia did not lead to 15 years of peace after the genocide?
Well, you can go ask the Bosnian if he feels at peace. You talked about World War II and Hiroshima. I am glad to think that Hiroshima is for you an example of a peace-bringing force. The entirety of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s in Japan, which is okay because you don't have any Japanese people on your team. Now we'll talk about the last example that they used, the last inspirer for the team of our government. And I'm glad they brought him up because he truly inspired them. George Orwell. Now, you might not know this, but George Orwell wrote a book called 1984.
Oh, really?
You used him. Now, the book 1984, that world isn't at peace. It's in order, of course. It is very much in order. It is very orderly. It is very precise, but it's not at peace. So, because you see, peace is not the absence of conflict. Sorry. Peace is not the absence of wars. Peace is not the absence of chaos. Peace is the existence of harmony. Peace is the existence of ties that bond people together. Peace is a state that so far, sadly, we have not been able to reach, precisely because every government in the world tried to use force. Every government, as much as this government, has confused bombs with olive branches, death with birth, surrender with peace. The Houthis of unrealism. They say that we are unrealistic, yet they see the world as a game of Age of Empires, where they can force people to agree with them, and where you have to wait 10 minutes to get a warrior. Now, we don't see that. We see people, we see their hopes, we see their struggles, we see their attempts to make peace, and we see them attempt it peacefully. The case for non-violence, ladies and gentlemen, is very much true. It is very much correct. Martin Luther King saw it. Gandhi saw it. Mandela took a while, but he finally saw it. And when he did, it was a glorious, peaceful revolution that didn't end up in an empire.
Yeah.
They may say we are dreamers, ladies and gentlemen, but we are much, much more than dreamers. And we are certainly not the only ones. So join us and reject this motion.